myself sick, sing myself sick about you.
I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are Velocities in Music, VIMTV, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, we're excited for the return of the Walkmen with their 2012 release, Heaven. This is a different album for the Walkmen. We reviewed Lisbon, their previous album that came out in 2010. I think we reviewed it pretty favorably. We liked it. I remember liking it. And here they are now with Heaven. So between Lisbon in between Lisbon and Heaven, in 2011, there was this album. You guys might have heard of it. It was called Helplessness Blues by a band called Fleet Foxes from the Seattle area. Now, the Walkmen, how this relates is the Walkmen are actually they grew up in D.C., then they moved to New York City. They have a recording studio in Harlem. They joined that, early 2000s New York City buzzing music scene. It was an awesome little group of bands that came out of there, and really it's still producing a lot of good music. So why this band decided to pick up shop, settle in Seattle, and record Heaven in Seattle, and then also kind of like in the woods of Washington, kind of seems like something that, the band Fleet Foxes would do for their follow-up sophomore album, Helplessness Blues, that everyone loved, including this guy right here, one of my favorite albums, really of all time. I love that album. The reason is because this band also realized how awesome Helplessness Blues was. They loved it so much that they actually hired the same producer, Phil Eck, to come in and review it for him. To produce it for him. And so they did. And so what you have is it's like they're trying to recreate Helplessness Blues. When I listened to this album a few times before I read that, before I learned that. And then once I read that, I was like, oh man, that explains everything. This album is more minimal. You can tell that they're trying to go for a bigger emotional effect. The production is just so pristine. It is just so pristine. And the vocals play a much bigger role in this album, much like they did on Helplessness Blues. So it's produced in a way to kind of recreate some of the effects presented to the listener on Helplessness Blues. However, this is a different band with a different writing style, with a different instrumentation palette. These guys do things differently than Fleet Foxes. Not to mention, it's a whole different style of music. Yes, related, but still very different. Tom, what was your take on Heaven? Do you feel like you were in heaven when you were listening to it?
Not quite.
Okay.
It was still pretty good, but it was a little bit of a disappointment for me, mostly just because things sounded uncomfortable almost. I don't feel like these guys were really settling into their natural musical niche, which to me, I thought they sounded very comfortable on Lisbon.
I totally agree.
I listened back to that album and listened to this one, and to me, it just seems like they're going in a different direction that just doesn't feel natural to them. Now, once I listened to it more, I began to realize that really, these songs are well written. I mean, with the chord progressions, with the melodies and everything. But for me, the way it's performed and the way the production is good. Like each individual part is well produced. I thought the vocals were mixed a little too highly and a little too clear, a little too front and center, and for that, it stifled some of the emotional appeal that they were going for with the instruments because I just didn't pay attention to them as much. They didn't all blend together. But everything else about the songwriting is actually pretty good, but the way they're performed is to me just not gripping at all. Nothing about this album really commands or grabs my attention, and so that made it really difficult for me. I'd listen to this album, over and over again, and I'd get to the end, and I'd just kind of feel like, what just happened?
It's 13 tracks, and it's really not that long of an album for 13 tracks.
But it feels longer than that.
It does. It does feel longer than that. And the thing is that the Walkmen have always kind of shown their punk influences on their sleeve. And they're starting first and foremost with the very short, like 3-minute track lengths, and the very simple song structures. Not simple like A B A B. These guys do some cool stuff with their song structuring and their songwriting for that matter. And that stays true here. But where Fleet Foxes Helplessness Blues had these really diverse, vast, deep songs that just expanded upon your listen and changed throughout the track. And then throughout the album, you had a variety of different moods. You get the variety of moods here, but you just don't get the girth that you had in Fleet Foxes Helplessness Blues.
It's not all that thick in terms of how it's presented to you. And what I mean by that is like the intensity on a scale from 1 to 10 never gets above a 6 or a 7.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So for me, when it's just kind of like pushed down below that point, it makes for a really tedious listen for me.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that makes it gripping.
Yeah.
There's nothing that pulls me in. It's just kind of like it kind of peaks there. Songs like track 7, Song for Lee or Song for Lay, however you want to pronounce that. That was a highlight for me. I see it was one of your track picks too, because I felt like that's the closest that it gets. You know, when he's just kind of belting, "Sing myself sick about you," and that, I love that line. I love the way he sings it, and I'm like, why isn't there more of this on here? And why doesn't he even take that to the next level?
It comes down to, Tom, I think it comes down to warmth. This is a concept that is actually really big in writing, that we talk about all the time here when it comes to listening to music and reviewing albums. Warmth. It's where the band or the artist gives you a reason to care about the music. They put you in a position and personify the music through you. And by doing so, they give you a reason to care. Whether that's some sort of concept that they're laying down on it, which is why I think concept albums score very well with us, especially me, or just some sort of really emotional song that just grips you right from the start, and then builds on that throughout the album. The Walkmen never do that here. The lyrics are kind of, I don't find it really easy to get attached to these lyrics, and I just felt some of the songwriting, as you said, wasn't dynamic enough to really grab me, and really, wasn't gripping enough for me to care. And that is a huge blow to an album that's designed to be emotional, that's designed to get the listener's emotions just resonating out from the sound. And I think that while the production's great, and I think that the vocals actually do a good job, there's just not enough really, really good songwriting. While the songs are well written, I don't feel like they were written in a manner that actually served the sound that they were going for. And the exception to this is track 1, We Can't Be Beat. I feel like they did a really nice job building that song, bringing the drum. It starts off nice and acoustic. They build the drums in, and then big vocals. It really does sound like something off Helplessness Blues, and it works because they have a nice full sound. But the Walkmen have never been about full sound. They've been about minimalism in music, where you have really organic sounding drums and an electric guitar, and the vocalist rough vocals. That's what it's all about, and just creating kind of a very artsy aesthetic sound. It doesn't, applying that to this format, I just don't feel it captures the essence of what they're going for.
At the same time, though, I know a lot of people are really loving this album. I mean, we're actually kind of
we're going against the grain here.
Yeah, we really are. But so if you love it, that's great. We shouldn't stop you if you're making that connection to the album that we're just not. That's awesome, but we're just here to explain to you why that's not happening for us.
Well, and also keep in mind, I am not directly comparing this to Helplessness Blues. It's just when it's produced in a similar manner, and this is the conclusion I've come to. This just isn't that gripping, and that's what I think you can use that to kind of explain why. So, overall, like Tom said, good technically written songs, but just not gripping as an album. I just didn't feel like it really held its own weight. I'm going 67.
I'm going 66.
So, 60 on upper 60s albums for Velocities music. I like to explain what this means because it has a very specific meaning. It's where an album has some really good qualities, but has some things that really need to be changed for it to be in that 80s zone. And it's usually just like 2 or 3 key features that we'd have changed. So, what did you guys think of this album? Were you in heaven when you listened to it, or was it more like, I wish I had the Walkman not trying to be something that they really have never tried before? I do applaud them, though, for trying to expand. Leave us a comment at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. That's where we talk with you, get requests and ideas for the show. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
We'll never leave.